Can you afford your friends? Because it seems that people tend to have friends who are in the same financial situation. And a new survey highlights young people's tendency to actively seek out friendships with people who are in the same income bracket. Now, could this be because, according to that same study, 30% of Gen Z millennials say that they have friends who are actively encouraging them to overspend? Or could it be because of the American Psychological Association's 2023 report on stress in America found that the number one thing that is causing us persistent ongoing stress is finances? Or could it be that people just want to spend time with their friends, but they don't want to go broke doing it? And how much of these issues could be resolved with simple, open communication around our respective financial situations? For women specifically, we know that they say it's helpful to be able to talk to their female friends about money. But you have a large portion of women who don't do it. And of those women who say they don't do it, 60% say it's because they believe that it's inappropriate. So how are we supposed to bridge the gap between our private discomfort and hesitation and resentment around money with the ongoing open ways that it's having a very real impact on our friendships? Do we keep it to ourselves? Do we have a conversation? Something has to be done. Because between bachelorettes and birthday parties and our regularly scheduled Friday night hangouts and many occasions for gift giving that come up constantly, there are so many opportunities where money becomes an issue. And even if it's not a matter of overt spending discrepancies that are getting in the way, it could be in terms of our conversation and connection. Let's say that you don't have as many finances available to you as your friend does. Well, when she's sharing about her luxury car that's in the shop and how it's inconveniencing her, or she's complaining about losing her jade tennis bracelet, or she's talking about how her luxury trip got canceled, do you find yourself having any discomfort or resentment? Do you find that you're struggling to stir up empathy for that? If you find out that her parents are financing her home or taking care of her bills, what does that do to you? What does it do to the way that you see her? And how might that invite any kind of emotional distance between you as friends? And then on the other side, if you're a woman who does have more means available to you compared to your friends, how does that work? Do you find yourself measuring the things that you share about your income situation or your lifestyle because you don't want to be misunderstood? You don't want there to be jokes or assumptions, or you're working really hard to be mindful of other people's feelings and getting stressed in the process. At some point, we've got to have the conversation. Now, I'm no financial advisor and I'm no therapist, but I do know a financial therapist. Her name is Asia Evans. She is a board certified therapist, and her new book, Feel Good Finance, is helping people to feel more attuned with their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors around money. And so I want to share my interview with her. And after you listen to it, I want you to stay on the line, keep listening, because we're then going to talk about interesting research around women's money habits and how it impacts their friendships specifically. So stay tuned after the interview. But for now, let's jump into this conversation, starting with the issue of comparison.
But we don't always like to talk about money in general. We don't always talk about money with people who we're closest to. And if you are not having a conversation with your friends about where their money is not coming from, it's all up to your perception, your ideas about where this money might be coming from. But you don't know if there was generational wealth passed down, if somebody had their student loans paid for when they were going through college, or had their trade paid for, or somebody gave them a leg up and said, hey, we're going to pay for your wedding. We're going to pay for your house. We're going to pay for your first year living in a brand new city. We're going to pay all your bills. Like, all of that really does matter. And if you are just comparing what you think they're making or what you think is going on versus the actual reality, you're doing yourself a disservice because you don't know. And that's just talking about, more of the numbers. Just like, hey, they might have more money than you, like point blank, the end. It doesn't mean they can't be your friend. It doesn't mean they can't be there for you or you be there for them. But it just might mean that if you're trying to compare to them and like, why can you go on this bachelorette? Why does your closet look like this? All of the markers that we have of materialistic wealth will say something else versus what the reality is. You don't know. They could be swimming in debt and have no clue. You had no clue about it. And that's where it gets really hard because people don't want to be vulnerable enough to share all the time. And it's both ways. Like some people coming from wealth don't want to tell people. They're worried about the judgment. Some people who are coming from impoverished backgrounds or didn't have a lot and didn't grow up with a lot also feel vulnerable sharing that information. So it's coming from both sides. It doesn't matter how much money you have.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're speaking to kind of both sides here, because I know a lot of times when we think about money and finances, we do think from the perspective of the friend whose budget's maybe a little smaller or has
Yep.
fewer resources, and from that vantage point. But I like that you also kind of gave a nod to those who maybe have more resources than their social circle and are trying to figure out how to navigate that. Whether they, just come from a background that set them up in that way. Maybe they took on a new job and a new role, and it's kind of put them in a different lifestyle. So can you talk to us about that and how to navigate the whole budget conversation? So you just used the word vulnerable, which I love because it is a vulnerable thing to share what you've got and what you don't. And I am heavily on TikTok, more than I care to admit. Okay. And the number of videos I've been tagged in from, there's a bachelorette party and one person can't afford to, and she noticed her friend are acting differently. Or friends who say, we all really want to go on this trip, but we have one friend who can't. Is it rude to go without her? So just all these conversations and the ongoing conversation around how do we handle the bill? I mean, that's
Yeah.
an ongoing conversation. Do we split it? Is that being cheap? So when we want to communicate to a friend, hey, this is where I am, and you probably should know up front, so this is not an
Yep.
ongoing thing. What does that look like? Why is that so hard for us? Talk to me.
Yeah, so I think I love this topic so much. As I'm like diving in, I'm like, I love this. So I think a lot of it does have to do with that vulnerability first, right? And I think the vulnerability is attached to we have made a lot of meaning around money, who you are if you have money, who you are if you don't have the money. What does it mean to be on a budget? Budget is like the bad B word, making it seem like, oh, if you're on a budget, it means that you're broke. And if you're broke, what does that mean? And I think there's a lot of times that we get really caught up in how we are worried about being perceived by the other person versus these people love me, whether I have the money or don't have the money. If I have too much money, if I have too little money, like your friends should love you no matter what. And if they don't, we need to have a different conversation. If your friends are kind of making you feel bad about not being able to afford something or making you feel bad because you can pick up the bill sometimes, and not in the nice, I'm so grateful way, making you feel bad, like, why do you have it like that? If they're making you feel like that, it's time for a deeper conversation about this friendship. No one should be leaving time with their friends feeling worse. And if you are, we need to reevaluate and have the hard conversation of like, do these people need to still be in my life? So I preface all of that to then ask, like, have the conversation with the communication. If it's before the bachelorette or the birthday dinner or just a regular dinner, hey guys, these are a few restaurants. You can give the high, medium, and the low. And give people the options, or ask people, hey, what's the budget look like for people, and let them dictate. And then also, I want to empower people within the friend group to say, it's okay if you don't have it, right? Like, it's okay if you're like, hey, you know what? It's the new year, new me. I'm really trying to hit this savings goal. I can't go to dinner with you guys, but I would love to come for a drink afterwards. Please text me and let me know where you're going, or come to my house afterwards, or whatever it's going to look like. But there are ways that you can still feel included in the friendship without constantly feeling like you have to spend money to keep up and be a part of the friend group. It hurts. Again, listen, I am going to tell you, it can hurt, and it might hurt your feelings, but it doesn't mean they don't love you. And that is really what I want people to kind of push their friendships deepen them, to be more intimate, to say, we can have the conversation about money without feeling bad. And it will feel awkward at first, but eventually you'll be like, oh, is this in your budget? It's not? Okay, cool, girl. We're going to do something else. That's fine.
Yeah, and I like that you called out the fact that your friends love you regardless, and they're just trying to find a way to spend time together. That's ultimately
Right.
what they're trying to do. And if they're not, that says something else. And I think a lot of us are maybe not ready for that. Maybe some of us secretly know how fragile our friendships are, or we know that we're in a group that is heavily dependent on doing all the things, and
Yep.
that if we can no longer do the things, we can't be a part of the group. So that's very interesting. So like, let's say we are trying to get our money together so that we can not necessarily do more, but do things with more freedom, a sense of freedom,
Mm-hmm.
because we have boundaries. What are some tips you have for just kind of improving our financial wellness? So for the person who's like, I really want to get it together so that it's not such an anxiety inducing thing for me
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
friendship.
Yeah. So first I'm going to tell you to please look at your money. You would be shocked at the amount of people who are not looking at their money. They kind of know what their income looks like. They kind of know what might be taking out of their paycheck or where they're sending money to, but please look at your money. Understand where it's coming from, what you're saving for. If you have automatic saving or 401k, which is a retirement plan, know what's coming in and where it's going. After that, I need you to know what your expenses are. I need you to know how much it costs you to live your life every day. What is your rent? What does groceries cost? Do you pay for transportation? What does that cost? Bills, phone, internet, all of that. Not with your frills, right? Not with the I'm going out to eat every week. This is what I spend. Um, just what does it mean to keep you alive in your home? And then we can add on the bonus of like, hey, I have 17 subscriptions. Do I still want those? I am paying a lot of money for my gym, but I'm not going. Do I still want that? And the idea is to then know, hey, here's my income. Here are my expenses. What do I have left over? And what do I want to do with it? And that is really when it can get exciting around your goals. Hey, I want to go to my friend's wedding. I want to go on that big trip. I'm turning 30, 40 soon. What do I want to do? What do I want this to look like? And getting really intentional about those goals, and then setting up a practice that you can do on a regular basis to check in with your money. So I always recommend a monthly, at the very least, a monthly check in. If you really want to be on top of it, a weekly check-in with your money, to just go through, hey, this is what I spent on this week. This feels good. This doesn't. I went over this budget. Do I want to kind of slow it down for the weekend? And if you're in a couple, that is also a great time to have the conversation about money too. So like a little money date on a monthly basis to be like, hey, where are we at? What's our spending look like? And those 4 steps are really going to help you start the process. But to your point that you brought up earlier, it's not just about the numbers. It's also about how we feel and what comes up. And this is really a holistic approach to your finances, right? Like, I love that humans want to pretend that we can separate it. We can bury this. Don't worry about that. It's all connected, boo boo. It's all going to come out in the wash if you do not
Hmm.
pay attention to it. And you don't want to be explosive for no reason. And that's usually what happens, right? It comes out in ways you don't want it to. So I want my clients and the people who are listening to really understand that you cannot escape this. We all need money to survive in some way, shape, or form. How can you just feel empowered with it?
Yeah, that's so good. And what's interesting is, so you're giving us tangibles. I think just knowing your money status on a weekly basis helps you to better make those decisions, and maybe to make them more firmly and confidently, because you know what you're working with, because it does kind of creep in on us. And then I know for some, sometimes I've had resentment against my own self because I'm like, God, I went past my own financial
Yes,
boundary, because in the moment you're like, you know what? Yes, let's
it's
add dessert
fine.
too. Why
Mm-hmm.
not?
Yep.
So I think that's a terrific point and a terrific assignment that we can like tangibly, actively do.
And you can also like, I call it get financially naked. Like, and really what that is just like really looking at your money, right? So yes, looking at what your income is, but looking at what your debt is as well, looking at what
Mm,
you are saving for, looking at your retirement. You can do that with your friends, right? Like, especially now, and now I'm not trying to say do this with any friend, right? These are friends that you trust, that you know, that you feel comfortable with, that you feel safe with. Ask for some consent. Make sure that they feel comfortable potentially sharing and having these conversations. But that can be a nice, cute little date too. Like, hey guys, what did your spending look like this month? Let's talk about it. How are we holding each other accountable to what we want to do? This past week, I hung out with two of my friends. We sat on my friend's couch, ate bagels in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
and we talked about what our goals were for the year. And we all went down with our little notebooks and like said, okay, this is what I want to work on. This is how I want to work on it. And out of nowhere, I'm like, why do I feel like I want to text my friend and just be like, hey, I did do to start my week off strong. And that's that accountability. So yes, it is very vulnerable, what I'm asking you to do. But after you start having these conversations about money with your friends, it does get more comfortable. And blame it on my day job, but all my friends know I'm going to talk about money. They all expected. Don't come over here talking about I'm looking for a new job without knowing Asia's going to ask you about negotiating. Are you ready to say your number? Because if you cannot say it to me, who loves you no matter what money you're making, who would help like provide food for your family if necessary, then there's no way you're saying it to your hiring manager. So let's talk about that number. Let's do it. And I want you to feel as confident as possible. So it didn't always start like that though. It
Okay,
took
this is
work.
blowing my mind right now because I think when we have conversations around, it's great to have different friends for different things or to be able to talk about all the things with your bestie. We do tend to think about offering emotional support, child rearing support, spiritual support. I'm going to pray for
Yes.
you. Let's read together and learn together. I don't often hear women talking about financial support. I don't know. Do you think that's cultural, generational? What has us feeling like, oh no, that's very cringe, that's very private? Well, I mean, I guess that comes back to what you're saying before around it probably starts with attitudes and conversations around money when you were growing up. Did your parents
Yeah.
make you feel like that was a very private thing? So what's going on with that? Why we do feel so cringy around
Yeah.
having that kind of conversation, to your point, with people who have a history of loving for us and caring for us? Why is
Yeah.
that so deeply uncomfortable?
Well, I think it goes back to the vulnerability, right? So it means like, oh, we thought you were in this position, or what if they thought I was doing this much, or whatever it might have been. So vulnerability, I do think a lot of this comes from wanting to be humble in the past of like, hey, we're humble. We don't talk about what we have. We don't talk about how much we're making. We don't talk about salaries. But on top of that, now I think it is about kind of this moral assignment that we've given to people with whatever amount of money it is, right? So in the past, it was, if you make six figures, that's the golden number. You've got it. You're okay. You're safe. That looks very different for people who live in different areas. Like I live in a suburb of New York City. While $100,000 was great for me on my own and would have been great, I'm like, I don't even think I made that when I was single by myself.
Mm-hmm.
But that would have been cool. But I have two kids. I have a mortgage. It looks very different now. So I think that there's a level of not wanting to brag and wanting to be humble. I also think that we have decided that people who make this much money, insert blank here, are these types of people.
Mm.
And that has kind of forced us into feeling very vulnerable and exposed when we do have these conversations with our friends about how much we make or what we want to make, even saying what we want to make, especially for women. It is so hard for us to just kind of take the ownership because we haven't been taught that it's okay for us. We can think of all the words and adjectives that people describe women who are ambitious or want to make a lot of money. They're not positive words.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is such a great point about um, the meanings that we attach to certain lifestyles. Oh, she must be this kind of woman, or I want to be this kind of woman. So I'm going to overspend because it feels
Right.
good to be able to pretend to be
Right.
this kind of woman. So it's just so powerful, all the stuff that we attach to that, and how we might be judging our friends for it, right? Like if
Right.
she makes a lot of money, or if I find out that like her dad paid for her wedding and
Mm-hmm.
we had to save for 3 years and now I
Yeah.
look at her some kind of way, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
have seen that play out as well.
Just own it. Like I'll just straight up, I'm like, I'm jealous. I wish it was me. Free yourself. Like free yourself. It's okay to be jealous. It's okay to wish it was you too. It doesn't mean you don't love her. It just means like, damn, I wish somebody paid for my wedding like that. That
Yeah,
would have been nice.
definitely,
Mm-hmm.
definitely. Now, whenever we have conversations around spending more time with friends, or we share research around, what it takes to deepen a friendship and closeness, at some point we're talking about how Depth sometimes does come from just spending more time together. And it's hard to just get around, get away from that. And there are lots of systemic and environmental and cultural barriers that make that difficult, but you kind of can't get around. If I want to get closer to you, I got to spend time with you, see you, talk to you. But whenever that conversation is happening, whether it's on social media or here on the podcast, there's a large number of women who say, that sounds great, but I don't have it like that. I don't have the money to spend time with my friends. What are some ways you've heard from clients or how you would advise a person who wants more togetherness time with their people, but mentally feels like they can't afford whatever that looks like? What thoughts do you have there? Hey, thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Friend Forward podcast. Remember, the full episodes are available exclusively on our Patreon, which we refer to as office hours, and we'd love to have you join us. You can join anytime by visiting betterfemalefriendships.com/podcast. I hope to see you over there.
Let's go.